A warm welcome and hello to everybody listening, watching, or even reading this. It is an absolute honor to have Emily Byrd with me. She is a certified mastery method and transformational business coach. She's serving service-based entrepreneurs and really helping them hone in to their inner alignment, to their soul's work, calling them towards passion-filled, profitable business models and plans while doing the deeply transformational work necessary to be a successful entrepreneur. Emily has built multiple businesses and she has so much of expertise, wisdom, and experience in this space. I've definitely picked her brain so many times and I've learned so much along the way. Personally, she's based out of Durham, North Carolina, and she has a son, Craig, and two pets, King Louie and Winks. And you've got like a your guest, you're sitting a pet today as well, so that's amazing.
Yes.
So just welcoming you into the space and such an honor to have you here. You are going to be sharing this conversation around psychedelics and ayahuasca with us today.
I'm like so excited to be here and honored to be in this conversation with you, B. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's such an honor. And just some context for those that don't know, I have zero experience with psychedelics. I have a lot of biases about psychedelics. Um, I've only heard about ayahuasca in passing from different sources. So once I learned that Emily has gone through her own ayahuasca journey, I wanted to set aside time, understand what it is, and grab all the juice and all the material I can to educate myself and those like me who are considering it or who just want to learn more about it. So we'll
Mhm.
dive right into it. Can you start with just the foundational for us, Emily? What is ayahuasca?
Yeah, so by definition, ayahuasca is a psychoactive tea. It is indigenous to South America, mostly the Amazon or Amazonia. Peru, I think is like the biggest region, but other countries in South America as well. Chile, Ecuador, Colombia, yeah. And so how it comes to be a tea is there is a vine and there are leaves that are boiled together for days to become a tea. And so you drink tea in a beautiful ceremony and ritual. And yeah, then you go on the journey, which I'll get further into today for your guidance. But by definition, ayahuasca is scientifically, it is a psychoactive tea. And there's so much more to it than that. Um, yeah, so we'll get into it.
Okay, fair enough.
I'll
So
let you ask questions and yeah.
this is great. I think that's a great starting point. So we know the root of it. And could you speak more to what you said? It's a ritual, there's a ceremony behind it. What does that mean?
Yeah. Okay. So traditionally, which like going back to like 900 BC per paintings on rock walls in caves, okay? This is an ancient practice and it is one of spirituality, connection with the divine, and discipline, okay? So ayahuasca is it's so much more than a tea. Um, the background really is in ritual, in ceremony. There is a shaman who is like a spiritual guide who has traveled along their own ayahuasca journey and had the tea many times and been in relationship with the plant and the medicine. So it's a medicine, it's plant medicine. They've had their own experiences in ayahuasca. Carriers of the plant medicine are called ayahuasqueros. Ayahuasqueros. So those are like the shamans. Those are the guides that facilitate the drink, that facilitate the ritual. Okay. So ayahuasqueros have taken their own journey. They've been in relationship with this plant medicine for years. They have other ayahuasqueros that have taught them, that have been their guides. And these are like incredible shamans. Shamans are like magical people. If you've ever been in the presence of a real authentic shaman,
Mm,
they're just magical. They just exude this energy of knowing and oneness and connection and truth and authenticity, and they sing and they play instruments, and they're deeply just grounded earthly
mm,
angelic beings.
mm,
Okay, so they are the carriers. They are the ones that are in between us, those of us that are not walking a devoted, forever long, lifelong journey as an ayahuasquero, those of us that are not walking that path.
mm,
The ayahuasqueros are the carriers of the medicine. They are the in between the divine channel that ayahuasca opens and us,
mm,
the the layman folks out here on earth. So
mhm,
the shamans, the ayahuasqueros, the shamans that are the carriers of this plant medicine, they're deeply devoted. They're so for yoga, um, very much like bhakti yogis, right? They exude that practice and lifelong commitment of love and devotion to the divine, which
mm,
is, as you know, bhakti yoga is love and devotion and ritual. And there's a little bit of tantra as well. If we're going to relate it to yoga,
mm,
I'm not speaking to ayahuasca as tantra, but you and I know that tantra at its core meaning is about ritual and repetition and doing everything with deep intentionality. And so if we were to compare an ayahuasquero to a type of yogi, I
mhm,
would say it's a blend of bhakti and tantra. So
mhm,
love, devotion, ritual, practice, repetition. Yeah,
mhm,
connection to the divine. So the ayahuasquero is the shaman, the magical human angelic being who has traveled the journey many times with ayahuasca, has had mentors, teachers, gurus along the way, right? So they are the carriers of this plant medicine. And so they facilitate the space for us to partake in the ceremony. And
mhm,
I'm happy to like when I speak about my own journey, when I share my own journey, to give you what my experience of the ritual and the ceremony was in the moment. But and also there is something that happens before the ceremony, and I'd like to speak to that as well. But I'd like to give a little bit more context as to why we partake in such ceremony and ritual. I feel like that's perfect for right now.
yeah, 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 yeah. Keep going. I think this is so great. And just to kind of like touch on what you shared about the comparison between a different path, which is like yoga
Mhm. Mm.
with like ayahuasca, which is shamanism, which is Southern America, right? So there's just like
Mhm.
something to say about how they all come together, right?
Mm.
There's oneness, there's truth, even though they're different approaches, right? Yoga doesn't use plant medicine necessarily in the way that we go on a journey, but we do use plant medicine to recover from different injuries and to heal our body and, like in day-to-day well-being, rejuvenation. So it's just like such a beautiful flavor that you're bringing in. And I had no idea you're going to be doing this. And this is exciting for me as well. Absolutely. So understanding now that there is a shaman, they're conducting this space from a very divine and centered space. Um, and now you're talking about kind of the why. Why do
Mhm.
ayahuasca? And
Mhm.
before the journey, what happens? Tell us more.
Mhm. 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 Okay, good. Yeah, I didn't know I was gonna compare it to yoga either, but I'm like, I'm talking to you. Of course I can bring in this wisdom. Um, yes, and to just I thank you for like furthering the distinction between the two. This is just a comparison. The two are not connected. Obviously, they're not, but they are, like you said, lead us to the same place, which is really beautiful. Um, Okay, so why ayahuasca? And you kind of said this as well with plant medicine in the yogic or Indian tradition culture, right? Being something that helps to heal the body. So I would say that is, I would say at its core, from what I understood stand okay, and all of this is per my understanding,
Mhm.
per my experience, per what this Western white woman knows at the ripe age of 37, okay? Like, it's like what we tell our coaching clients, "Don't believe me, try it out for yourself. Don't take everything I say as the gospel. This is just my experience." So, but I would say from what I understand and have experienced in my own journey, the core intentionalities, more than one, but the core intentionalities that you can receive or have the intention of receiving when you say yes to this journey is healing, emotional healing, physical healing, mental healing, reprogramming, upgrading,
Mm,
spiritual healing, healing the deficits of spirituality. Um, Ayahuasca can help us connect to a greater realm of love and possibility and truth and hope that can in turn help us do feel more empowered, alchemize, catalyze our healing journey,
mm,
whether it is emotional healing, mental healing, physical healing, the spiritual healing. And I'd say the other intentionality, apart from healing, which is incredible, is deeper connection to the divine,
mm,
to become in deeper communion, which and I think this is another good mirror or another relative mirror with yoga and Ayurveda. Like Ayurveda is the right, keeps the body, creates the vessel as a clear open channel to receive the benefits of yoga so that we can connect to the divine, right? Like that's kind of like that path. And so I would say, like, in ayahuasca and in the devoted practice and lifestyle and path of shamanism, it's similar, clearing the body through dietas, which is what happens before ritual and ceremony. Dietas. I'll speak about that. But clearing the body in order to be the open vessel to receive the medicine, first stop is healing, right? Like first stop along the way is healing so that we can become open vessels and be a clear channel aligning with the divine.
mm,
So it's interesting how, like, I love this conversation because it's like there's I've loved yoga and Ayurveda, and I've loved that path. It's been a cornerstone of my life for almost 15 years, and then, to have this experience with shamanism, which I've been curious and reading about and learning about and educating myself about for about 6 years, but have not had that journey that with ayahuasca, other plant medicines, yes, but ayahuasca
mm,
until most recently. And so it's interesting, like how, like you said, they're two parallel paths they have different, expressions, but they're leading to the same place. So, yes, healing and enlightenment or connection with the divine.
mm.
Absolutely.
And if you could take us into this
Yeah,
your
that's
journey, into your experience, because I think that's the juicy part for me is like, tell me the details, tell me exactly what you experienced as, I'm not labeling it crazy, but as crazy as it may sound, just tell us the
Mhm.
whole vivid detailing of it.
Oh my gosh. Okay, get ready. So, the journey begins before you even sip the tea. Um, so dietas, which Diet, so diet, dietas, AS, is what you do for days, for weeks, for months prior to actually ingesting the tea. And dietas is basically like cleaning it all up, getting ready. So, um, abstinence from sexual activities, abstinence from any other types of alcohol, substantial drug uses that you have. If you microdose psilocybin, or if whatever you do, really like taking medication, supplements, all of it like goes away,
Hmm.
and your diet actually becomes very pure and clean. So it's like whole grains, vegetables, not a lot of salt. Um, I took out salt. I was eating like steamed mushrooms and brown rice. Like that's it. Sauteed spinach and a little bit of coconut oil. Like a little bit of coconut oil, no salt, vegetables, whole grains, no dairy, no meats, no mammals, no birds, no fish. Like all of it like gets cut out. And so if you really want to um, if you really want to like go there, you start that process.
Mm.
It can be 60 days, 90 days ahead of time, and just gradually caffeine, all of it like goes away. You just wean it all the way out, and you're just getting the body really pure, no sugars, no refined sugars, no processed foods. All of it goes away.
Mm.
And so you're in this space of like deep meditation with yourself every day, having a super squeaky clean diet, not having sex, noticing if there are sexual thoughts or tendencies, or if you want to other things that you might be doing, whether like watching Netflix, listening to music, like all of it becomes hyper aware. So like I quit listening to so I like hip hop. My son is 14. He likes hip hop. I quit listening to hip hop for I think it was about 2 weeks or so leading up to ceremony, because some of the lyrics are pretty vulgar and can be diminishing to women and violent, and then just right the language. So I was listening to like very like yogic spiritual music, and wasn't watching any TV, and
Mm.
um pulled back in my business, was meeting with clients, stopped doing as much, you know, off like on the cuff Voxer channel coaching, like all of that stuff. I had to pull back a little bit, and I was letting my people know that I was preparing for this and that I was going to be a little bit more at a distance. And so just really like taking yourself intentionally through the ethos, connecting with that intentionality.
Mm.
And for me personally, my intention was um, to to receive the divine wisdom that's here for me, and to surrender to the process.
Mm.
I didn't have an agenda. I didn't have like a specific question. I didn't need the journey to solve something for me. I was deeply intentional for days, for weeks, months leading up to the event, to the actual night of the ceremony. But I didn't have this like specific niched agenda of what I wanted to attain or solve or fix. But
Yeah.
the presence of intentionality was so deep for me. So I
Mm.
wanted presence, that there's a difference between like having that agenda of, you know, this is what I want to have happen. This is why I'm doing this. Show me this answer. There's
Mhm.
a difference between having that kind of, again, like very westernized, fast, like kind of cut through laser approach, versus just being super devoted and intentional with everything that you're doing, that you're thinking, that you're feeling, that you're bringing into your sphere.
Mm.
and returning to devotion, returning to trust, returning to surrender. There's a difference,
Mhm.
right? And so I was in that intentionality. I was in the channel of intentionality and surrender, trust,
Mhm.
and really like taking myself and my body through the experience. And
Mhm.
it's so interesting, V. I was the day of the ceremony was a Friday night, and it was held about 3 hours from my location.
Mhm.
And so I sat in ceremony with I did this experience with my sister-in-law and her best friend.
Mhm.
And we rented a beautiful Airbnb out in the woods that was seriously a stone's throw away from the retreat center that we had the ceremony in. And so we could have walked, but in Amelia's words, we had to drive our pillow cart there. We had my sister-in-law has this really nice SUV, and we had it packed to the brim with pillows and blankets and rugs and all
Mhm.
of our crystals and our rose water spray for our face and like all of the things that were like our comforts. And we had to have that. So we set up our space really beautiful. So but anyways, the earlier that was our ceremony started at like 7 p.m. in the evening. But that morning, I was driving from my home here in Durham to the location, and I was I'd never been there in that like I mean, it was like in the woods, and so I had to have my GPS on, and I had my phone actually doing Google Maps for me.
Mhm.
And about I don't think my phone didn't charge the night before. That's what happened. I thought it was charging, but it wasn't. See, the medicine's already working. I thought my phone was charging, but it wasn't. It was off the hook. And 90 minutes out from my destination, my phone is like on 0%. And I needed the address, right? I needed the direction. So I had to stop and I pulled out like my little journal and I literally like look at this. I wrote down
Oh, wow.
the directions to where I was going. And it was interesting because I called my sister-in-law real quick and I was like, my phone's about to die. She was on her way there to our house that we had rented. I was like, my phone's about to die. I hope I make it because these directions look crazy and I know where we're going. And she's like, oh my gosh, okay. Well, just surrender the medicine. She had done a journey already before. So this was her second time. So she was like, just surrender. The medicine's already working. And I was like, okay, okay, right. So I was able to make it to my Airbnb and I was really nervous. I got there and I was just like, am I going to be okay? What if something happens? I'm so nervous about the physical effects that I've read and heard about
Mm.
this tea that I'm going to drink. I'm not as much concerned about the psychological and emotional stuff because I've done so much work on myself and like very deeply connected to spirituality and personal growth and transformation. Like I felt pretty equipped with that
Mm.
on that side of it. But I was like, who the heck knows what it's going to be like, but I think I can handle it. But
Yeah.
when it came to the physical aspects of the journey, I was really nervous about that. And so and I'm happy to address some of those concerns. I think that was one of the questions around like debunk all the things that we hear. But I was really nervous about how I was going to feel physically. And I just kept asking Stephanie questions of questions and questions. And she was just like, at one point, she just turned around. She's so patient. And she was like, you're going to be great. You got this. And you have to trust your choice in being here.
Mm.
And so I was like, okay, do I trust myself? Yeah, I do. I do. I do. I do. I trust myself.
Mm.
So here we are, like at the story point where I can go into my journey as a whole. And I'm curious if it would serve to answer questions like the myths first, and then tell my story, or vice versa? What do you think? How are we in flow right now? How are
Well,
we doing?
I feel like we're doing really, really good, and you're sipping tea, which I'm guessing is not ayahuasca.
No, it's not.
But the thing is, like, if I were to recap what I've understood from you, the process of dietis, is very interesting because, again, not knowing what to expect. But if we look at every spiritual ritual, there is so much of preparation required. Like in Vedanta, in our Indian scriptures, we always talk about meditation isn't just like sitting on the mat, right?
Mhm,
Meditation starts like when you wake up in the morning, your intentionality is there. Are you aligning your actions? Is your body purified? Are you eating sattvic food? And then when you sit down at the mat is when meditation already started, but it's when you start experiencing that deeper connection. But if you were to, let's say, come from a run and you're panting and you're just like all worked up, there's no way you could just transform into like a meditative state
yeah.
because it's your nervous system, it's your brain that's just gone through like this whole ebb and flow,
Mhm,
right? So just to understand that over multiple months, somebody would prepare for their ayahuasca journey in a way where their body, to whatever degree you can, like you've mentioned really deep stuff like music, removing the toxicity of that from your life, removing conversations that are not serving your journey right now, just like filtering all of it out, detoxing it. That's huge. Like, I mean, if I could compare it from, again, an Indian standpoint, you were a hermit, you were a monk for a solid
yep,
couple of months leading into your ayahuasca journey, right? And even if before you go into the into the actual journey of it, I want to learn more about, did that process change who you are after your ayahuasca journey? Like, are you still more detoxed, or did you find yourself jumping right back into those things because your body was craving it? How did that
mhm.
change you?
Yeah, great question and great point. So, no, I'm still hermiting. I mean, I have like Craig, my son Craig, his friends, we have like a parent friend group. And those are the people that I physically see more than my family, on a daily basis. We see each other at basketball games and practice, etc. They're reaching out to me. They're like, "Hey, are you okay? We haven't seen you. You're like dropping Craig off and picking him up. You're not coming inside. You're not speaking to us. Like what's going on?" And
Mhm.
I've had to just be really honest with them. And most of them had never even heard of ayahuasca, and they weren't familiar with it at all. And I did not feel called or have the energy to like go into it with them. And so I was just like, I'm 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 in a spiritual process right now, and I just respect you giving me the space. And even then, I don't know that some understood completely what's going on, but uh, for me, it was really important to have my family on board and support. So I told my parents. Obviously, I did this with my sister-in-law. So my brother, I have my older brother and my parents, and so everybody knows what Stephanie and I are in process of right now. And this is like a couple of weeks after,
Mhm.
and this is the most in-depth conversation I've had with anyone about it besides my sister-in-law and her best friend.
Mhm.
And we did the journey together. So we've been kind of processing together. But and I knew that I could have this conversation with you, V, because you are deeply aware, evolved, and conscious. And we had had a conversation prior to this moment where I was like, yeah, I'd actually love that'd be a really beautiful way for me to express this.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm still in that space of not being very as social, being very intentional with where I go and who I'm around and who I talk to and what I'm consuming. And for example, the day that I returned home from my journey back into Durham, stayed a few nights before and after, right? Or after the journey. Um, stayed a few nights in the mountains, stayed like a long weekend, came back home on Monday, and it was Halloween. And woo, talk about like Interesting perspective, you
Mhm.
know? Just I dropped Craig off at a party. I did not go inside. I did not go to the party. I was invited to the party, and that was one of those big moments of, like, I have to let them know not to take it personal.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I am not coming to the Halloween party where there's, like, Michael Myers and blood and demonic stuff everywhere and dressed as a demon knocking on strangers' doors asking for candy. I've never really gotten it. Like, I've never really been down for Halloween. I'm more of a Samhain kind of girl, the Celtic harvest ritual. I'm
Yeah.
more of that kind of vibe anyway, but yes. So has it changed who I am or I would say or how I'm living. I would say that it has deeply shifted my calibration back into one that feels ultra aligned and connected, clear, not clouded. Also gave me perspective and awareness of all of the toxicity that exists in our daily environment, whether it's the Wi-Fi things or the waves of Wi-Fi or the food, the mass production food, the food quality, um, media, phones, all of it, it's just I I would say personally for me, one of my biggest um things I've been working through is and it hasn't been hard. Again, it's just a deep shift from within how I show up in my business.
Mm.
There is this energy now that I have more than ever before of feeling deeply embodied in my purpose and in my power and in my strength and in my light, and also loving my dark more than ever, right? Very embodied and integrated in that way. And letting the that which is not important or serves or that which distracts,
Mhm.
letting those things just kind of fall off and not worry about it. And I would just say there's just this deep alignment, and it's like everything else that's not has just gone away, and it's okay.
Mhm.
Whether it's a client, a potential client, or an idea I had, or a project that I had, or it has either come into like more complete congruence, or it's like gone and it's good either way, like
Yeah.
that. So that's been a really cool shift to observe, and I've surrendered to it, like not trying to micromanage it, not trying to like hustle and bustle and rush and force. And that is part of the Vietas process, is like surrendering and not hustling and not rushing and forcing, and really just like it's like you receive ayahuasca before you even receive it,
Mm.
living in that devotion and awareness and intentionality.
Mm.
And then you receive it, which is like the next level, next layer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's just, I feel there's so much of richness that even though I want to get there, even before there, there's just so much to unpack with you and to understand. So I, first of all, really honor that in the part of the process of filtering people out, you've kept me in the bubble. In fact, we've met twice ever since. I feel like deeply
Yeah.
privileged. Um, and the other piece, which I kind of, it's a sidetracked question because one challenge I see spiritual seekers face
Mm.
is that when we go into these deep spiritual processes, whether it's Halloween, whether it's just, toxic people, quote unquote, or
Mhm.
alcohol or all of those things.
Mhm.
Yes, there's so much to say about creating space away from those things because then you have to process them if you're there.
Mm.
But there's almost like a intensified duality for a moment
Mm.
in time. You know what I'm saying? Where it's just to the point of I've just
Mhm.
I've just up leveled and I've upgraded
Mhm.
my consciousness here, and now suddenly all these things are not me. But that
Mhm.
amplifies the duality within us. And I always wonder, why is that? So I don't know if you've thought about it in this way, but it
Mm.
was just like I keep asking myself, why is that? Why is it that we in if anything, why was it not that Emily had her shamanic experience and she went into the Halloween party and she was able to open up
Mhm.
into it? Why did it require her to protect? What was about it?
Mm. Wow. I love this, going deeper into that duality. I come back to the word alignment and truth.
Mhm,
Like, what feels aligned, what feels true. As I said, like, I never really fully aligned with Halloween, but it is something that is part of the culture here in America, right?
mhm,
Especially. But as a seeker, I naturally, even as a child, I've always been drawn to other, like, people that don't look like me, that don't have background like me. Like, look at me and you. I've just for all of you watching, I have stayed on V. Like, we're gonna be friends. We're gonna collaborate. I've known you for almost 2 years, and I love you, and we're gonna get to know each other. And I've, like, always and it comes from a really, like, authentic place of just, like, me feeling connection with people in a different way, or a deeper way, I'll say. I have always had this awareness of there's so much more out there, and I've also had awareness of that I am not my contentment does not live in the mainstream, generalized, stereotypical experience. Contentment for me is exploring, expanding, going to different countries, being immersed in different cultures, hearing other languages, English not being number one, sitting in different temples, ashrams, religious spaces, ceremonies, rituals. Like, I have always been open to that. And I guess for those that choose the comfort and safety of the mainstream experience, whether it is Indian culture or American culture, whatever, whether you're in Texas or Delhi, um, I think underneath it is comfort, right? And it's safety and other parts and programming and belief as well, but um, societal expectations and restrictions and boundaries, all of that. But I would say for me, like, I've always been the pusher of the envelope. I've always been like seeking beyond the boundaries, beyond what I'm told I can see and feel and experience. I know there's more out there, and I want to go. I want to go see it and feel it and eat it and drink it and taste it and talk to it. I want to be in relationship with it. And
mhm.
so, as far as the duality, coming back to the alignment, just giving that context that I've always had that just natural drive and tendency and unconscious motivation in life to can you still hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. One of my headphones just popped out of my ear. Um, I think just because that's just a natural tendency of mine. For me, the whole journey from start to still processing, integrating now, has been one about a return back to my own inner truth and alignment. And if Halloween has never been something that I really align with,
Mm,
and also not just the culture, but the people holding that space, I knew that I would, you know what it felt like, V? It felt like I would be betraying myself and my experience if I walked into that haunted house
mm,
and had to turn down a Sam Adams Oktoberfest beer 5 different times and
mm,
look at the fake food on the counter and the delivery pizza. Like, it none of it would
mm,
feel good to me. None of it would feel aligned. It all seemed like poison.
mm,
And if I hadn't had been on the ayahuasca journey, if that experience had come up and the invitation was there, how would I have handled it?
mm,
I would have probably, most likely scenario is, dreaded going secretly on the inside because I knew it wasn't necessarily my thing,
mhm,
being around the people, the food, the feeling, the Halloween. But I would have felt obligated to show up in
mhm,
some capacity for my son because it's his friend group and the parents are all nice and they like my son. And so I need to go and like at least show face and not be
mm,
rude. Really interesting. That would have been like the scenario. And it probably would have been something that I would have had to like coach myself through a little bit and like show up and maybe like not stay long or come up with an excuse. I gotta go walk my dog or something, or
mhm,
like to not stay the whole night. Or if I did have to stay the whole night, I would have just like pushed through it.
mm,
And I look at that now and I'm like, I don't really want to do that,
mm,
you know? I'm good just telling people no. I'm good just like holding the boundary for myself and I guess like when you said protection, like protecting my peace, protecting the sacredness of my life,
mm,
you know? Like, and there are gonna be some things sometimes, like I'm a basketball mom. I have to sit in gyms and listen to the buzzer and the whistle and the people cheering and yelling. And sometimes it's a lot of people, and I get really sensitive to that energy. And I usually have to leave the stands and go stand by the door or take a break outside, come back in, stand around the perimeter of the gym. Like I do protect my boundaries and my energetic space
mm,
in those situations that are just unavoidable. Like I'm going to show up for my son's basketball game, you
mm.
know. But if it's optional, if it's a Halloween party that I don't have to go to, you know, I'm
Yeah,
not going to go.
yeah.
So I think it's the protection of the sacred. And I feel like that's a long way to answer you, but it is that returning home to self and sacredness and alignment of what's true for me and
Mm,
how do I want to spend my time and energy.
mm,
I don't know if
yeah.
that answers it, but duality, I mean, oof, I feel like we could talk polarity and duality for a long time.
Mm.
What are your thoughts just in reflection of what I'm sharing? I'm curious.
You know, it just makes so much sense because I always apply the question to me is
Mhm.
let's say if I've come out of a class or a program or even self-reflection, I notice that when the consciousness goes up, there's almost like an instant pushing away. But the way you've explained it makes more sense. It's not that you're pushing it away, but it just drops off.
Mm,
There is something within you that was not clear and now it's clear. So
mm,
you've come to your center and you realize, well, all these things that I was doing were throwing me away from my center. So if I want to stay anchored within me, then I need to naturally let go of these things. To the same capacity that I've let go of alcohol, right? I was never a heavy drinker, but there was a point in my journey where we would drink some and go out and party and dance. And that was my way of becoming free. So alcohol meant freedom to me at one point. But once I could see that I don't need alcohol to be free, I can still dance in a party and not feel shame and not feel restricted,
Mhm.
right? And if I were to say, am I rejecting alcohol or am I pushing it away? No, but it doesn't have charge.
Mhm.
There's no charge there. If I were to be in a room full of alcoholics, maybe there might be a memory, a nostalgia for the older times and be like, yeah, like we had a good drink. I love my LIIT, Long Island iced tea. But beyond that, there's no charge. There's no desire to pursue that thing that was once so desirable.
Mhm.
Right. So I think you've answered my question, and I know this will be a reflection I take deeper for me because it's not necessarily amplification of the duality. In certain cases, it is,
Mhm.
right? Where there's an ego that evolves and there's a judgment,
Mhm.
there's like a labeling.
Yeah.
But in your case, it's just a natural letting go of and you coming back
Mhm.
into your deeper center. And you're already so aligned, Emily. So to me, it's just fascinating how deep we can go into ourself and our being. So thank you. That was such a well answered and well explained.
Mm. Well, I want to just thank you for letting me share. But the judgment has been that's been an interesting experience. I'll use the example of one of because it is the example for me right now. Like I don't have I would say like post few weeks, week or a couple over 2 weeks post ceremony, I think, or almost 2 weeks post ceremony. Um, I still feel very clear in
Mhm.
the way of um, like taking my walk with my dog and just noticing, like, wow, I haven't had a thought.
Mm.
Like, no thoughts right now except of how pretty the leaves are, how gorgeous nature is. Like, that I hadn't even thought about what I'm doing today yet. I hadn't even thought
Mm.
about oh yeah, I have a client call in an hour and I haven't worked out yet or like oh, there are the thoughts. But like just noticing how like empty
Mm.
um and clear I feel, which is just a very peaceful way to live
Mm.
and to be in that state. But there's, in that same parent friend group, and maybe this will be relative to those watching and listening because we have different social circles, we have different networks and connections and communities that we're part of, and not everyone's going to always be your people per
Mm.
to say. Um, and I've noticed when we're talking about naturally falling off versus like pushing away from. I want to say that they're probably yes, the pushing away from kind of there's some charge to that. Um, there's this one, parents um, that their son is very good friends with my son, and th- the relationship has for the boys it's great, but for the parents, for me, if I'm being brutally honest, it's never felt aligned.
Mm.
But I've tried to make it work for my son.
Mm.
And since my journey, there have been a few, text messages, phone calls that I haven't answered. I haven't answered the phone. But they've been asking me to help them out with things that I looked at it and I said, this has been like the basis of the relationship is me giving their kid rides to places, doing stuff for them
Mm.
where I haven't really expressed that level of need.
Mm.
And um interesting that you talk about alcohol because last night they sent me a text and asked if I would pick him up and from basketball practice and drop him off at the bar that they were hanging out at?
Mm.
And I said, no,
Mm.
and I didn't respond until an hour later. And it's like an arcade bar, food, drink, arcade, but it's like an adult place, and it's like a Tuesday night. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. And so there's a little bit of judgment there, right? Like I'm holding a little bit of judgment.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Wow, you only hit me up when you need something, and you're at a bar on a Tuesday night." Like, they could have been at a work function. Who knows? Like, who am I to say?
Yeah.
But I've noticed that, yes, that's naturally falling off, but there's also a little bit of judgment that I'm witnessing as well, and to be so clear,
Mm.
bless,
Thank
to
you.
be so clear on my walk
Yeah.
and notice like, wow, I don't have any thoughts except how beautiful nature is. But
Mm.
then 8 hours later to have that experience, like there is duality there.
Yeah.
There's polarity there. And to be able to hold that has been, and not judge myself,
Mm.
for having the judgment, right?
Mm.
And see where I can release the judgment of them, because ultimately I have a lot of compassion for them and their family, and I care for them as people. um, that's at the heart of, that's in my heart. My
Mm.
heart is that I care and I have compassion, but and also I have limits now, and I've become very present to, throughout this entire experience. Here it is. I've become very present to where I've reduced my limits and my boundaries in order to, show up in a certain way that I think is how I should be, or that it will benefit the whole, or it's for
Mm.
my son, or something like that. But the truth is that when I reduce my limitations and break my own boundaries, there is a sense of betrayal that comes with that, self
Mm.
betrayal. And then I'm harboring resentment and judgment, and that affects all of me and my soul and my spirit and my relationships. And maybe I'm muttering something underneath my breath about that family to my son, who I'm very close with, and he and I are laughing about something together, but it's really like a judgment that doesn't need to be here. So that's been really awakening for me.
I love that. Thank you for being
Yeah.
so vulnerable and bringing that here.
Yeah.
And it is a part of the human experience. I feel like as long as we're able to see the judgment and keep moving through these layers. And
Mhm.
I feel like what's happened for you is because of the ayahuasca journey and because of so much of the preparation you've done into it, plus your decades of self-development,
Mm.
you're able to relate more to the non-judgmental side of you than to confine yourself to this being that's just, I would say surviving, the survival parts of
Mhm.
us that are
Mhm.
judging, that are afraid, that are frantic, that are um, scarce, right? So it's like because of the work you've done, it's an example for everybody that it is possible to have more and more parts of you that are just open and receiving and accepting and compassionate.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you, V. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I think like there's so much here, and we're already like an hour into our conversation. Do you want to keep this going? Do you want to share more, or do you feel like this is a good point for us to kind of pause, reflect, and then maybe take a second jab? I'm open either way because I have time.
Yeah, I'm happy to share about like the actual experience and to debunk the myths, because I think that's really important as well. And there is some like spiritual context that I want to give to that as well,
Yeah, for sure.
if
Let's
you're
do it then.
open.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Um, so people are like scared of ayahuasca. They think it's like this, you know, I was scared. I mean, we think before, if you look at stuff on the internet, it's eh, it can be kind of scary when you're reading about this, poison that you're drinking and it makes you do all these things, and you can't breathe, you vomit, you have diarrhea, you have hallucinations. If you're working with a dark shaman, you
Mm.
have a dark space, if you're not in complete, if you have dark energy, if you are unresolved, it's going to be a really hard experience for you. Like, I'm just like lasering out a lot of the main themes that
Mhm.
are out there on the internet. And again, going back to the intention of this, and it's like spiritual and psychological benefits of ayahuasca. The intention is to, create a a path and place and a channel for you to have a clear vessel, yes,
Mhm.
to do your detoxification process, diatas, and to connect with the divine. And as ayahuasca has become more known and facilitated in modern society, it's sort of like what all westernization does, in a generally speaking kind of way, is like you take something beautiful and sacred and you like try to commercialize it and monetize it and make profit from it and, you know, build a brand with it and like all the things we do in a capitalist modern society. And ayahuasca has unfortunately been in some of, been subject to some of that as well. One of the first things I heard, and now I really understand it, when I was reading about ayahuasca, Aya, is the grandmother medicine. It is deeply feminine, energetically, very feminine.
Mhm.
And obviously, like the feminine energy is one of love and creativity and, you know, like womb safety in the womb. Um, and it is the grandmother medicine. So it is the medicine of your ancestors. It will bring ancestral wisdom to you. Like these are all, this is how I've been oriented in understanding the depth of this plant medicine. Whereas at the same time, I was like everyone else on the internet. If you just Google it, you can spend hours, years reading about how scary the experience can be as well. One
Mhm.
of the first things that I read was, be careful who you work with, be careful what type of shaman you work with. Some shamans work with darker energy, some play more in the light. And
Mhm.
I haven't done a ton of research about like shamanism and light versus dark. And but what I can say, and what's wrong with dark? Why have we made dark bad? Like, what do you mean by dark? Do you mean evil, or do you mean like what does dark mean to
Mhm.
anyone? Because there's like dark feminine energy, which is beautiful, right? As long as it's healthy integrated. There's light masculine, as long as it's healthy integrated, right? So there's light and dark everywhere. There's polarity everywhere. um but where I see the problem happening, this is what I know now, from what I know now, is when the sacredness is no longer held. You said in a conversation that we've had recently, what is sacred will remain, will be sacred. And ayahuasca is a sacred being. Most like traditional shamans that are deeply connected to the plant and their tradition and their culture and their lifestyle, is ayahuasca is a being. It is the energetic being. It is the grandmother. It is the feminine being into like physical form,
Mhm.
picks us up, takes us on a journey. But where I see how it can go wrong, and you have all these scary stories, is not necessarily like working with a dark shaman, maybe working with like a fake shaman,
Yeah.
or being in a circle with a bunch of dark, unhealthy, unresourced energy and
Mhm.
not having that space held. in the light with intentionality.
Mhm.
And maybe folks in that circle didn't do dietas, they didn't go so deep, they didn't have intentionality, they were, seeking the hallucinogenic trip, and they're here to trip balls on ayahuasca and say they did it with their friend, like tell everybody back home that they went to Peru and drank ayahuasca for 3 nights in the jungle. And you know what I mean? Like the intentionality is not there. And my ceremony was opposite of that. It was very light filled. It was a womb of love. It was beautiful.
Mhm.
And I my experience was incredible.
Mhm.
And I don't think it's just because I'm incredible and I've done all this amazing work. Like I know it was the space that was held for me as well and the intentionality that I brought into it. But I could see how when it's not held as sacred and the intentionality and the education is not there, that it would be a hell of a trip.
Mm.
It could be tough. I could see
Yeah.
that. But then at the same time, I'm like, and you get a lesson.
Mm.
You get what you get to learn in that experience.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. I think what you're suggesting almost is something I heard in a webinar, and I've used it ever since, is are you here for transformation or are you here for entertainment?
mm,
Right? So if you're
mhm,
just here to sit back and just like, get high on stuff or laugh here and there,
mhm.
ride the waves, then it's a very different experience.
Yeah.
Um, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like what you put into it, you'll get out of it. And it's and and I think I understand, like if I were to use a parallel for um dark shamanism or a fake shaman, I
Mm,
would associate it to past life regression work because I've done a lot of it on myself and I've
mhm,
had a lot of healers do it on me. The ritual itself has a nuance that anybody can be trained in if you're passionate about it, right? Like if I were to sign up for a class, you would tell me these are the steps. Anybody can run through the steps. But what makes the person real and authentic versus being surface level is their ability to have gone in their own depths, into their own crevices, and to have held
mm,
it. So when I've worked with a past life regressionist who literally took me through 2 hours of work,
mm.
a week later I'm calling him up with some problem and he doesn't even remember me, then there's misalignment right there. He confused me for my friend.
Wow.
Both my friend and I went there and, we had our own separate journeys, if you call it.
Mhm,
But there was misalignment there and I could pick it up right away because to
mhm,
me, you're just doing the ritual. You're not
mhm,
connecting with my being in the process and you're not connecting with your being in the
mhm,
process. Whereas I've
mhm,
had past life regression experiences where, not only was I very gently in a trauma informed way led into my past life, but very gracefully brought out of it to the point where I was like, no, I want to do more. And she's like, "Well, we can always do more, but why don't you digest this? Why don't you sit with
mhm,
this?" Right? So it's not about like, it is about the depth. It's not about the quantity of the depth, right?
mhm,
And in these journeys, like you went in with zero expectations, but now if I kind of loop into what you talked about in the beginning, for a person that's going in with the expectation, for example, again using that healer who is being very ritualistic, he said, what is the intention that you're bringing and what do you want to solve? So I was like, okay, like, afraid of this, or, I want to achieve this and it's not happening this. So he made it goal oriented. And it
mhm,
was okay because you do want to have some objective, you want to have some clarity with which you're entering the space.
mhm,
But that clarity may take you away from what's really out there, what's really available,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So again, I don't know if that resonates with you, but like the fake and the real aspect, there's that say
Mhm.
where it's like either you're just going through the motions or you're really there. You're really creating that space. You're really connecting to the being.
Yeah, connecting to the being is so true. Like ayahuasca in its sacredness. It is highly, ritualistic. It is a ceremony, but it emphasizes that personal journey
Mm,
and the discovery of personal meaning and knowledge of self and connection to the divine. And so being being in that channel of intentionality of the beingness, I think is, I could be in a circle full of unintegrated, non-intentional folks that are just putting on a playlist and drinking tea to get high or whatever, and it probably wouldn't be the best experience. But I hold my own center? Could I
mm,
hold my own beingness?
mm.
Um, that's that personal power. And now that I've had the beautiful light filled experience that I've had, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I could journey with anyone else because I loved my shamans and I loved my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's start with like the actual what happened, like once you arrived there and just walk us through that now. I think that's like the most exciting part.